Hello, everyone. September 12th, 2006 Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Nicole Lentini, and on today's live broadcast, we're speaking communications and support in the first 6 weeks of the school year, as well as the rest of the year, and how admissions can be a better partner in the communication handoff and as supportive members of our community to all of our constituents. I'm excited to speak with Cyndy Hill, Director of the Penn State Parents Program, and Brian Watkins, Director of Parent and Family Affairs at the University of Maryland, about this topic today. But first, let's give a shout out to the sponsors that make today's broadcast possible. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network, offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live webcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues, in the industry. Today's live viewing experience is powered by Maestro, the platform. All accessible in the videolive.com and in podcast form on iTunes. Today's episode is made possible by Chegg Enrollment Services. Chegg is the leading student marketing firm focused on helping institutions save time, save money, and recruit smarter. Leveraging a multi-channel approach that includes digital search sites, social media marketing, and direct-to-student messaging, Chegg's Enrollment Services can help you accelerate response time while capturing real-time student interest. Visit http://chegg.edu.com/insights to learn more about Chegg's most recent student research and recorded professional development webinars. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. M. Stoner is offering a free webinar on analytics for digital storytelling on September 28th. Analytics provide us with vital information to track and measure audience behavior so we can extend the reach and impact of our storytelling efforts across all our communication channels. What do you measure and how do you use that data to refine your story? Join M. Stoner for this webinar to get your analytics. Registration is free, and we're tweeting out a link shortly where you can sign up. Without further ado, I want to introduce my fabulous panelists today. So I don't know if, let's go with Cyndy first. You want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background in education and in this particular area.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Cyndy Hill, and I'm the director of the Penn State Parents Program at Penn State. I've only been in this position about 15 months, but I come to it via new student orientation and Welcome Week programming, so the student side of programming. So I've had a lot of interaction with parents and families through my work with orientation. I've also worked at Texas A&M University and some private sector work in development. And I'm also a Penn State parent, which really gives me a lot of experience because I consider my kids my personal case studies when it comes to figuring out how to answer some of the questions sometimes.
I love it. Who better to speak to that than somebody going through that themselves, right? That's wonderful. All right, how about you, Brian?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Watkins. I'm the Director of Parent and Family Affairs at the University of Maryland. I've been here since 2005. Time does pass quickly. Prior to being here at Maryland, I was at DePaul University working in academic enhancement as the Director of Orientation Programs. So had lots of connections doing that with new students, but especially with their parents and family members and helping them with their transition to the institution. And before working at DePaul, I worked in campus activities, but also touched orientation in that role. And so I think there's always been this arc or trajectory for me of working with parents in some capacity. And so I just have a really great opportunity to do that every day, and really love my job. It's filled with all kinds of wonderful challenges, as Cyndy knows.
I can only imagine. That's excellent. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic because it's actually a topic that's come up recently, even in my own office, of kind of how do we do this handoff better? You know, this is such a busy, stressful time for everyone. And it really, I think, drives the point home of the importance of communicating as kind of a larger institution and making sure we're all on message with each other. So, let's start big picture. Why is this relationship so vitally important with parents and families, and making sure we're cultivating this from the start? Who wants to jump in first?
Oh, I will, I guess. It's interesting that the timing of this podcast is interesting, because we have just started a collaborative relationship with our admissions office to talk about this very thing, and sort of that handoff from the admissions process to orientation and then to full matriculation of the student, and how we maintain the messaging so parents are comfortable in the decision that their students have made, right? Because we're still sort of, I don't want to say recruiting students as they go through that process, but we need to reassure and educate the expectations from the get-go, from the beginning, all the way through. So I truly believe we all need to be using the same messages. And we're working on that here. We're a very, very large institution, and trying to get common messaging sometimes can be a challenge.
Yeah, and certainly I think everyone in admissions understands the critical role that parents and families play in the decision. And so I think we need to understand that doesn't just end once that admissions decision has been made and the students have gone through orientation and now they're fully matriculated. That relationship continues. And so parents and family members play a really essential role in supporting students and contributing to student success. And there's a critical role they play with retention. And there are so many other ways that I think the institution can rely on parents and family members to help us with the kinds of messages. Excuse me, I didn't mute my phone. With the
it's a parent reaching out right
exactly. Now. I gotta go. With the kinds of messages that we're delivering to students, I think parents and families can also be really helpful with that as well, and kind of reinforcing the messages that we're trying to send.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea. And it's I saw that, in our prepping for this conversation, you're rallying around sense of community, I think, from a really early start, which I think is really nice, and the idea of kind of pulling in others who have been part of this process before. So do you find that before orientation you're kind of doing a lot of outreach, like, hey, you've been through this before, can you be part of this process with their new families? How do you kind of start to be proactive as you know that you're reaching these sort of big transition points?
So there is some, I'll speak from experience on our campus. Yeah. There are some touch points that we do parent to parent. Or family to family. During orientation, there are opportunities for us to ask some current parents of current students to come back and talk to and interact with the parents of our new students. But I think, Cyndy and I were talking earlier, I think we all have even higher goals of once a student is admitted, to being able to reach out to families and say, welcome to the institution. Here are all these great resources for your students, but we also have some resources that we want you to know about because they relate specifically to you and the role that you play.
Excellent. Do you have anything to add to that, Cyndy, as far as kind of starting that outreach and kind of that conversation?
Yeah, I think Brian said it really nicely. We reach out to families right before orientation. I'd like to be doing it sooner because I think that it's reassuring for parents. Your student accepts the offer of admittance. When you think about the life cycle of a student, if you can match your family connections with the life cycle of the student, then I think we're doing a better job of meeting the needs of our families. And, reaching out immediately with that message that says, your student just accepted the offer to Penn State. Welcome to the family. And here's what you can expect as a member of our community, right? We're going to support you and your student. And by supporting you, we're going to help you then support your student. So I think sending those messages from the very beginning helps parents engage, become a part of the community, but also understand some of the expectations that we have of them as their student is going through this transition.
That's a really important point to drive home. It's a two-way relationship, right? It's not only going to be on your end. You're also telling the families, like, here's what to expect, but here's things that we hope that we expect you to do as part of this relationship and as part of this community.
Right.
Love that. And what kinds of outreach do you do? I mean, I know there was conversation around newsletters and booklets, and where do you kind of pick up with that communication from admissions typically? Do you see it kind of happening earlier in the summertime or even earlier than that? Do you see it at Admitted Students Day? Where do you kind of find that your relationships with them start to really kick into high gear and you start that early transition process? Start with Cyndy first, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. We have some role with our accepted students programs. I sit on a panel to talk to parents, but I don't feel that's where my office begins the relationship with the parents. My office begins the relationship with the parents prior to orientation, when we send a welcome email that says, your student has accepted their offer, they're attending orientation, and here's some things that you need to know. Your student has received this email, this is what's going to happen, this is what you can expect. So that's really the beginning of the relationship, and that's when parents start to identify offices like ours as a potential resource for them.
Excellent. Does it look about the same for you, Brian?
Yes, absolutely. We don't actually reach out to parents before orientation, so the handoff for us really is at orientation. And I have an opportunity to speak with parents at orientation, and then we will continue that pretty significantly following orientation. As I think our first newsletter comes out mid-August before move-in, so that we can start developing that relationship with families and deliver the information that they need when they need it. And I think that's a really important part of the communication tool, and some of what Cyndy was talking about is making sure that we're developing that relationship and connecting with families in a meaningful way at the right time. Mm-hmm. And so as we're developing our communication, whether that starts before orientation, and then continues throughout their time with the institution, we develop the topics for the newsletters based on what's happening in students' lives at that time, and especially the first 6 weeks, which is one of the highlights of this session, of the importance of it's such a critical time in the transition, and so what information can we share that's really going to help and support the student and their family during that really critical time.
Definitely. I'm just thinking of all the excited and scared faces I saw at orientation, and kind of that struggle between those two emotions is pretty transparent on a lot of people's faces. And so I love that you're so intentional about the information you're giving, and hopefully, ideally, it sounds like giving it before it needs to be asked, being able to address those questions before it gets to a point where the demand is so high for it that you can kind of anticipate that. So what are some of the big topics that you tend to see year after year that are really going to be the most important that you're identifying in these first few weeks?
Well, I think there's two things that I like to look at. It's sort of the practical topics, right? When do I move my student in? Do they need bed risers? The sort of the basic, do they bring their, some of those kinds of things. And then there's the emotional part, and I don't know if Brian experiences this, but sometimes I feel like our office borderline has just little mini therapy sessions with our parents, right? it's okay to feel that way. Yes, I know. It's difficult. You know, your child is sick. No, you don't need to hop in the car and drive up here. You know, so being able to, I think sometimes when you're on the phone with a parent, you can sort of actually sense their level of stress go down with that conversation. And I think if we can help parents reduce their level of stress, then the stress that their students are feeling, which we all know they are, at least the students aren't having to deal with parent and family stress. And the parents, you know, sort of escalating it even worse. So we do a lot of one-on-one conversations with parents to try and help with that.
Wonderful. I know that I've been the recipient sometimes of those initial calls being in admissions because I'm that person they initially made that relationship with. So I'm so grateful that roles like yours exist that are there that we can kind of say, you know what, they're here to help. They can help talk you through this. They understand this transition that you're going through. So I'm grateful that you're doing that kind of work.
Well, and I also want to acknowledge that not all institutions have people like Cyndy and me on your campuses, and so I think it's really important for you to take a look at who else on your campus is there to support you. I think it's wonderful that a parent or a family member might reach out to someone in admissions because that relationship is already there. But there are all kinds of terrific people on your campuses who you can develop a good working relationship with as someone who can then be your, what we like to call your handoff. So who then after admissions is the next great home for our parents and family members. And certainly every campus has someone who can offer that kind of support. And so it might not be a specific office, but it could be a dean of students or a member of the resident life staff.
Right. I like what you said about handoffs. We talk about things around here, we call it the warm handshake. So it's not just a handoff as it is, you know, we're not just handing them off, we are placing them in the care of the next person who knows how to deal with the situation. But we're providing some backstory, however that happens, it's a warm handoff, right? It's not just, I'll transfer you, click, right?
Exactly. Yes, thank you for that point.
Yeah. And I also know
really good point, especially when a student is, schools can, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask Brian, and I've lost my train of thought a little bit, but I'm sure you get those phone calls as well that they don't know who else to call, so they just transfer everyone to the parent's office.
Right.
So.
And often by the time they get to us, we're like the fifth person that they've been transferred to. And so their level of frustration is way up high. Right.
Yeah. Agreed.
Oh yeah. I think your frustration increases exponentially with each transfer that you go through in the phone system. Yeah, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, Cyndy. I was just going to jump in just to say, you know, I know that we're an institution ourselves that part of the human touch is part of our, you know, our mission and our kind of overall kind of institutional aesthetic, you know, if you will. And so having people like yourselves and having that, I love that idea of a warm handshake, of not just saying, oh, here, you know, I'll patch you off to this office, but actually, you know, even taking the extra time to, if I'm transferring somebody over to you, I'm also going to, you know, Cyndy, if I'm making a call to you saying, here is the story of this family. These are the conversations that we've had. This is kind of where they're at in the process. I think they're anxious about X, Y, and Z. Makes such a difference, so that one, they don't have to repeat their story all over to you again, and two, you know, you're already feeling prepared to be able to deal with that conversation, and that goes a long way.
Right. Yeah. And I also think that there's some responsibility in offices like ours, or offices, universities that don't have offices like ours, that to help communicate to our colleagues and our partners how to best deal with parents and families, because maybe they don't know. You know, it's not something they work with all the time. When they get a hold of the academic advising department, you know, there's frustration on the advisor's part, right? Because they don't want to be dealing with the parents. But maybe if the academic advisor had some tools in their toolbox, that they would be able to better deal with that situation and hand that parent off to the right person.
That's an excellent point. I think we could all benefit off of that. And even just from my own experiences in admissions, I think having better tools in my toolbox to know how to be the best support I can. You know, I'm not a parent myself. I haven't gone through this experience. I've watched the emotions that happen at orientation, but I haven't actually experienced those myself. So I think that's incredibly beneficial for a lot of us out there that are having this interaction with families. I mean, off the top, are there anything, you know, maybe I'll start with you, Brian. I feel like I've made you talk a lot, Cyndy, in the last few minutes, but you know, any kind of big things that that you feel any admissions counselor, anybody else maybe watching this broadcast today could benefit off of, things to keep in mind when they're working through this transition with families and with parents?
Well, you know, I think that I'm sure Cyndy would back this up, because we hear it all the time. I mean, the number one concern of a parent or family member is the safety and security of their student. And so whatever we can do to help to alleviate some of that concern, and that's not just directly related to their literal safety of being free from violence, but also just knowing that they're in a good place, a place where there are people there who care about their student, and that there are resources available to assist their student if and when help is needed. And so I think that's a really, you know, as we look at Maslow's hierarchy, the second level up on the pyramid is security. And I often talk about how I think what the communication that we deliver with parents and families and the relationships that we develop with them helps to meet that need and that level of in the hierarchy. And so I think that's another really important thing to keep in mind regarding that issue.
Yeah, and I think that if admissions officers could speak on that behalf, on those kinds of topics, Brian, that they would make, I think that would really instill confidence in parents, right? So you're not just selling the school spirit and the pride and the academic program, but you're selling the fact that you're sending your child to this place that's going to be a really good place for them to be, both safety, you know, mental health, physical health,
That's right.
And all of those things. And I think that's a great message for admissions officers to be sharing.
Absolutely. And to know, I think, you know, that loops back to your suggestion of make sure you know who these people are on campus that, you know, that students need to talk with for their different needs, and just know who your resources are on campus, because relationship with those people on campus shows that it's that kind of community that you can meet those kind of needs in wellness and in safety and whatever else might be a concern, especially in that first year, but you know, through all 4 years, that that you have that close relationship that you can say, oh yeah, we can meet that need. Here's the person that you need to talk to, and addressing those concerns early on.
Right. Yeah. It's important for all of us to have our own toolbox to reach into, and oftentimes that's other people who can help us. You know, often our initial reaction when a parent or a family member is on the other end of the phone is yuck, or oh my gosh, I don't know what to do right now. I'm not used to talking to parents or having to deal with these kinds of issues. And so knowing that you don't have to be the solution, you don't have to solve the problem, but really knowing who could be helpful to you as a professional and help support the person that's on the other end of this phone. I know that you know, when Cyndy and I talk to parents and family members, sometimes all they need is an ear to listen. And I will say to a person that I'm talking to, you know, I don't feel like I've been very helpful to you today. And they'll say, oh, but you have. I just needed someone to listen. Because I know that I can't fix everything. I can't solve all of the problems. But that's really sometimes all they need is someone to listen.
It's so true. And I think admission counselors could benefit from that lesson anyways, just in speaking with students and families, even at the beginning of the process, because I know, oh my gosh, I can't even count how many times I've had the conversation with that first time. I'm having a college-bound student parent, talking about like, I just have no idea how to navigate this process. And I just say, it's okay. That's what I'm here for. Every time you have this moment of panic and you have all these questions and you don't know who to go to, guess what? You can call me and I will help you and I will walk you through this. And it's true. You can just feel the relief through the phone of like, oh my gosh, thank you. And just even being able to say, it's okay. That's my role, is to help you through this, I think can be huge. And I think that's an important thing for anybody watching this, and especially new admission counselors, to know that what you said, I want to drill home the point that it's okay if you don't know the answer. It's okay if you can't solve the problem, as long as you kind of are aware of the resources you have available to you to be able to help that family. And I think that's true at the beginning and the end of our time with them as we hand them off to whoever might be that next person.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely true. I do realize I didn't put in a plug for our hashtag, so I want to pause the conversation here for a minute to make sure any viewers, if you do have any questions for Brian and Cyndy, make sure you use the hashtag HigherEdLive, and I am keeping an eye on TweetDeck, and we'll make sure to ask your questions as I see them. But I do, Cyndy, I have to ask you, you shared this idea of the oh shoot week.
Oh.
And I just would love to hear more about that. I just love that idea. And I think I've seen that in all the students' faces, but maybe if you can talk a little bit to kind of how you and your office deals with that kind of moment in that student's first few weeks.
So students use different language than I use, just so I'll preface the conversation, which is why it's in quotes.
Yes.
When we talk to parents at orientation, we try and hit the topics that they're interested in, and we also try and give them an idea of what the life cycle is going to look like for their student. So it's pretty much the same, right? So we know that I always say that when a student starts at Penn State the first day, everything is wonderful, right? Everything's great. My roommate's great. The library's great. I love that walk across campus because it's such a beautiful campus. And I always say Penn State has that new car smell, and there's just nothing you can do to get rid of like that new car smell. And then about 3 weeks into the semester, that's oh shoot week, right? And it's like, oh shoot, they were serious at orientation, right? They were serious about time management. They were serious about making that roommate agreement. Like the new car smell is now worn off, and oh shoot, they were serious, and I didn't pay enough attention at a new student orientation. And so we talk to parents about, so that's a bump in the road, right? And so we talk to parents about how you help your student learn to make decisions and learn to be autonomous and increase their confidence in making decisions when they hit oh shoot week or whatever other bump that might hit in the road, right? And so that sort of illustrates to parents that they need to shift their roles into that sideline coach that says, oh, I remember them talking about that resource at orientation. Maybe you should stop by their office. So that's how I use oh shoot week. But yeah, it's about right now for us.
Yeah, right around this time of year. Yeah, this lovely middle of September week where a few weeks, and actually it's third week exact timeline that this is starting to happen.
Yes. Grades start
It's
coming
feel
back.
like, oh yeah. And I feel like this is the week typically as I'm like planning to get on the road for travel that I start to hear from these parents that I just saw a few weeks ago at orientation. So I think it's good for any of us, whether we're lucky enough to have an office like either of yours, or knowing where resources are if we don't, to be ready for it right around this time of the school year is a really good point to make. That's excellent. I'm curious, I didn't prep you with this question ahead of time, but I'm curious how maybe, I know that Cyndy, you said you're fairly new to this role, but how seen this communication change over the last few years, in any space within this role, what new topics maybe you find that you're covering and things that you feel like you don't have to address so much. Maybe Brian, if you want to speak to that first. Yeah.
Sure. I think this is on my mind because we've had so many calls lately, but I think student mental health is really it's always been important, but it's not necessarily been something we've focused on in a proactive manner in years past. And I think over the past, I would say 2 to 3 years in particular, we've seen a lot more students presenting with mental health issues, and a lot of it is depression related. And so, we've had at least one call a day over the past few days of working with families who are recognizing that in their students and wanting to guide their student in the right way through what they're experiencing. And so I think we've certainly started to do more in a proactive way of educating parents about kind of what to look for. And when you see this, how you can help them and what is available on our campus. So that's one thing that comes to mind, probably because I'm just in the thick of it right now. There are certainly other topics, but that's one that's really important.
Well, and I can't think of a topic right now, but trends. What I have noticed in the 15 months I've been in the office is the increased engagement that we're having with parents. Mm-hmm. And when I look at our phone records and do an analysis of our phone volume, I mean, we're having significant increase in phone calls in our office. And when I say significant, we had an 86% increase in phone volume in the month of August. Now, there's lots of reasons for that.
Wow.
Yeah, lots of reasons for that. We have a very large class. We have a very large class. We have a lot of changes. We have a new student information system that we all just love, and then increased visibility of the office as well. So I think that parents are increasingly more comfortable in reaching out and asking those questions. So that's a trend I think I'm noticing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's helpful too, just to know both from kind of the reaches, kind of the questions that are getting asked, and just to stay on top of that, I think is so valuable. And I'm curious to see too how maybe your communication methods themselves change. We talked about e-newsletters and phone calls and emails and things like that, but I know that as we were preparing to do the broadcast today, you even mentioned, Cyndy, like, maybe Google Hangouts could be something that we use down the road with our families. So I'm intrigued. Maybe we'll check back a little bit down the road just to see how things change there too. I think it's all about just making sure you meet them where they are is going to be the biggest kind of focus, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and parents are certainly more tech savvy than they were years ago. Certainly, when I started at Maryland, I know that we had done still some paper newsletters, and discovered that just really wasn't the most effective way to reach families now. And so that's when we went to an electronic email format for those, an HTML-based newsletter. But even now, we're seeing some more active presence on social media from families, and being able to utilize our Facebook and Twitter accounts in a really helpful way, and another way to engage parents and families. And so it'll be interesting to see where the next 5 to 10 years take us with technology, and I think parent and family, their comfort level with that. But I think there's a cautionary tale here too, in that I think we rely on those pieces, but it doesn't mean we reach everyone using those methods. And I think that's the real challenge, I know for me personally, and the work that we're doing here, of I know that we're missing a constituency of folks. And so we're going to just start looking harder at who are we missing, why are we missing them, and how can we be better about making sure that those families have the information that they need.
Right.
Yeah. So important is that idea of access. And yeah, just because you see a lot of people on Twitter or on Facebook does not mean they're all there.
Right,
so true. And actually, in speaking of access, you're making me also think of inclusivity as well. And I thought you've driven a good point home in using the term families and really being cognizant of the fact that, you know, not every single person you're going to be interacting with is of that sort of, you know, I don't even want to use the word typical, you know, but it's every parent, no matter what. And so being very careful with the way that you're making sure you use inclusive language for all and making that very intentional is so important, and something I want to highlight as well.
Yes, that is very important. And we knew it was a good thing. And I think this past summer in particular, we were very intentional, both the orientation office, which is a completely different office than my office, but we worked together to make sure that we were using very inclusive language throughout orientation programs, so that every member of the family felt welcomed, and recognizing, like you said, Nicole, that not all of our students have a parent.
Right.
And so there are other family members who are here supporting them. And even if they do have parents, their parents might not be able to come and take that time off of work. And so it might be an older sibling or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent who's here providing that support. And so and just in doing that in the language that we use, after almost every orientation session, I had a family member come up to me afterwards and say thank you for sending that message, because it spoke to them. So we know that we're doing the right thing when those conversations happen.
So true. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm glad that you intentionality behind that and making sure all families of all strokes feel welcome at that event. That's so important. I see that we got a question, actually 2 questions. So I'm going to start with Ashley's. Do either or both of you connect parents with local alumni? And if so, what are parents looking for out of those connections?
Yes, we do. Our Alumni Association actually coordinates student send-off events. And so that is our families, really their first contact with our alumni, and an opportunity for them to connect with alums. They could be included on listservs. You don't have to be a graduate to be involved in the alumni events to do that. We have to be pretty diligent on the back end with our relationship with the Alumni Association, so our communication is really good, or else things fall through the crack pretty easily. But we also have parent volunteers that are a part of my office that also attend these events, so to try and make things a little bit seamless between the 2 programs.
Excellent.
Yeah. We have some connection as well, both through some recruitment events with alumni and parents that open up their homes to students during the recruitment process, and then several of our regional alumni clubs, when they host events, they invite parents of current students who live in the area. But we're starting to do more and more of that, because what we've heard parents say is, I can't get to campus, but I'd really love a University of Maryland connection in my hometown. Mm-hmm. And so tried to facilitate that a little bit more through some of the summer send-off programs and recruiting parent volunteers to host those. But also just creating those connections for families, so that when we do have a University of Maryland hosted event in their hometown, that we make sure that we invite not just alumni, but also our families.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really, really great point. I like that, yeah, not just alums, but anybody who it comes back around to, you're part of that larger institution's community, and making that relationship of somebody that you could get coffee with or have just down the road to be able to talk about concerns and questions, or just kind of, talk about what's happening at the institution. That's such a great connection to have nearby. Thank you for that. And then Greg asked, why is it important to you as professionals to have an office like yours on campus? Let's go back to you first, Cyndy.
So why is it important to me? or to higher ed in general?
Both, but I think let's talk higher ed in general.
All right, let's go in general. I think it's important as families change and relationships change and technology changes, which keeps our students and our families connected more frequently and for a longer period of time. I think that we're a true benefit to the university because we provide a place for parents and for families. Like this is your place. I'll tell families at orientation, your students have faculty, they have academic advisors, they have RAs, they have orientation leaders, and you have me, right? So it's the landing place. It's a place for them to come and start solving whatever issue they have. So I think it's really important at directing the parent communication and energy toward one place in the institution. And then we sort of triage the situation and then can filter it out, as needed. That's what I think the benefit of an institution is. That does not, in our case, does not prevent phone calls to the president's office. I wish it did, but it doesn't. But I do think it does alleviate some of that and streamlines the relationship with the institution.
I think that's an excellent point. And just since you offered it, does your own opinion, does your opinion be in higher ed differ at all? Is it different because you are a parent as well, since you offered?
I love my job. So it's important to me because I am happy to come to work every day. I love what I do. I love talking to parents. I love working with students. So that's really important to me personally. I love to know that what I'm doing is helping a student, maybe indirectly, but it's helping a student and helping Penn State to be a better institution. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that any better, Cyndy.
Ditto? Is that your general?
Yeah, Cyndy was talking. I was thinking about all of those same things. Is it necessary for every institution to have one of us? No. I think from an institutional perspective, institutions need to make the decision based on the resources that they have and the kind of relationship that they want to have with parents and families. Every institution is going to answer that differently. But what I think Cyndy and I know from our work and in our interaction with other colleagues who do what we do is that we recognize the importance of being able to have a place for parents and families to land, a place for them to go, a place that they always know that no matter what they can call this office and someone is going to be there to listen to their concerns and to try to offer some assistance to their student, because really ultimately that's what we're here for. It's for because we're concerned about the success of all of our students and recognizing that so much of the student support comes from the family. As I said earlier, I do worry about the families that we don't have an opportunity to connect with. And I think some of those are parents of our first generation families. Mm-hmm. And from a lot of our underrepresented students and their families. And so I think we need to do a better job of reaching out to them. But we could spend a whole nother session on that topic, I think.
Most definitely, not a doubt.
I'm bookmarking you both. I'm giving you a save the date for future episodes that you're going to be back and talk about that conversation. I joke, but I'm serious too, because you really do. You drive home such an important point, and that's true. I think of your interactions with them and ours as well in admissions. We're trying to do what we can to give that support, but the same way that I have that, those parents that call me and just need me to, talk them through, this is what it looks like to submit an application, and this is what these different deadlines look like. For every parent that does know to reach out to me, I wonder how I can better serve those that don't reach out to me. So I think we really do have just so much to learn from each other as different resources for our students and families, because even though I think in admissions it's easy to just think of the students that we're serving, we are just as much, we are that place to land for them through any of these admissions questions too, of just, for either party and for counselors too. I think it's so important to remember we have multiple constituencies within admissions that we need to be thinking about. And so everything that you're bringing up is really helpful to myself and hopefully other admissions folks that to think about how can I serve these populations better? How can I anticipate their needs better? What are these questions I keep getting every those questions better? How can I improve my access to others better? So making me think of a lot, and hopefully a lot of reviewers as well. I'm sure you are, based off of kind of questions we're getting and everything else. Speaking of, no other questions coming through right now. So it might be it as far as from Twitter, but as we're kind of nearing the end of the hour, I kind of want to just take a little bit of the time to talk about maybe things that admission offices can do to, whether they have an office like yours or not. We talked already about, being aware of where your resources are, and being aware of kind of the way that you have these conversations and facilitate these connections with families. But do you have any kind of recommendations of things admissions officers can do as far as, specific outreach they can do to offices like yours, or events that they should be attending, or meetings that they should be setting up, ways that we can, that really concrete things that for offices that maybe don't have an office like yours, things that and those that do have offices like yours, really intentional meetings or whatever that they could have with you so that this handoff in this conversation is better. I know that's a big question.
Yeah, well, I think one relatively easy solution might be to gather some folks around a table who, even both within admissions and outside of admissions, who touches parents in one way or another. Who at your institution has interaction with parents and families? And bringing those folks to the table and talking about how are we doing, and how are you interacting with parents and families, and what are you hearing from them, and how are we meeting their needs, and how are we supporting students in our communication with parents and families. I think starting there would be a big help, because then you know what it is you're dealing with and you'll have a good starting point. And I think there are also some good collaborative relationships that could come out of a meeting like that. We used to have a group here that met on a regular basis of all the folks in the different offices that connected with parents and families in one way or another. We're starting that back up, because I found that to be a really great way, even for me, to know what colleagues were doing around campus, and sometimes they were hearing things that I wasn't hearing about, and so those were helpful things for me to know, because that might be something that we were able to address in an upcoming newsletter of reasons that they were getting phone calls and I wasn't. How might we be able to address some of those things?
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're doing the same thing, Brian. We are starting up re-energizing this campus-wide sort of parent and family working group, which I think is really important. I think the other thing is, for universities that don't have a parents program, is to think about the next logical step of where the parents are going to interact with the university, and that typically is orientation. So developing a really good relationship with orientation is also really important, and I think that admissions and orientation can work together very closely in making sure that that you're reinforcing the same messages, and that admissions officers are setting up the expectations for orientation to be successful, right? So yeah, that's absolutely true. And it was something interesting happened. You keep bringing up these points, and it's funny because it's very timely for me and for my office. This year at orientation, we've always kind of gone to it just as supportive of it and to say hi to our families. I go because it's one of my favorite, next to, graduation and admitted students day, it's one of my favorite days to be a part of, because it's like, oh, they're here. I've been working with them all year and they're here. And I think even just being visible is such an important part of being part of orientation, and saying hi and like, oh my gosh, aren't you excited? I'm excited for
for you. But I think you're absolutely right. Actually knowing the way orientation works and knowing what's going to be available to families and helping to prepare them for what that event looks like, especially since it sort of is this event that marks that really official handoff, I think, in our eyes of, okay, admissions, you're kind of done with admissions now. You don't need us anymore. So here's everybody that you need to connect with down the road. So yeah, if you're an admission counselor, you're not going to orientation, you should really think twice about that. You should really, for just the emotional side of it and the actual informational side of it, that's really, really great point. So I think we've really hit a lot of important points. But I don't know, any last thing that I haven't mentioned, anything I haven't asked either of you that you just want to leave us with before we say goodbye?
One thing that I talk to my campus partners about, a lot of campus partners have a negative view of working with parents. They think they're helicopter parents, and I am working really hard to sort of reframe that conversation on campus and remind people that parents are doing what they're doing because they love, they care, and they have concern for their student. And I think that's the most important thing to remember.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's excellent. And there was something that that Marge Savage at the University of Minnesota said. And I'll never forget this. She said, if we begin our work with parents by thinking that they're a problem, then they will be. And that has always stuck with me.
That's a good point.
So when that phone rings, I don't have the attitude of, oh, another parent. I even though it might be the fifth or sixth person who's calling that day, and my own level of frustration is getting up there, I have to let all of that go and know that whatever reason they're calling, that is the most important thing to them in that moment. However misguided we might think that is, it's very real, and we need to recognize that and try to work through that with that person. But that quote has always stuck with me, and I pass that along to as many people as I possibly can, because I think it really helps us to reframe our work.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. That's a really great thought to always keep in mind when having these interactions with families. We want to be there for them. It's out for a reason. They're not reaching out just to say hello. They're reaching out because they care and because we can help them, and we want to help their students and help them navigate their day feeling a little bit better about their son or daughter, whoever being on our campus, and that we're taking good care of them. Excellent points. Thank you both. I have learned so much from this today, and I hope our viewers have as well. So thank you for being guests today.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Pleasure. And like I said, be prepared. You're coming back sometime down the road. We're gonna keep this conversation going. But so thank you once again, and thank you as always to our program sponsors, Chegg and M. Stoner. Tune into Admissions Live on Monday, September 19th for NACAC 101, What to Know Before You Go, with host Adam Castro and guests from the NACAC planning team. I'm heading out on recruitment travel, actually, so you won't see me in October, but you'll see Daniela Norden next month talking about interpreting enrollment metrics, so keep an eye out for that. I will be back November 21st and looking forward to being back on. Stay up to date with upcoming episodes from Higher Ed Pros by subscribing to the newsletter at higheredlive.com, and I will see you all in November.